Today, the Shambles in York is one of the most picturesque streets in the world. Every year, millions of tourists flock here to photograph its charming half-timbered houses as if they had stepped straight out of a fairy tale film. But that is only a perfect disguise carefully layered on by time itself. The truth is, if you were standing here in the year 1500, you would see no beauty at all. Instead, you would be confronted with a brutal reality, a vast open-air slaughterhouse where there was no room for dreams. Here, the air was not meant to be breathed, it was meant to be tasted. A choking mixture of rotting meat, fresh blood, and open sewage flowing through the street gutters. And those towering timber houses, they were not built for beauty. They were built to strangle the light. The street became a damp dungeon where disease bred faster than human greed. Why would one of the most powerful cities in England tolerate such absolute decay? How could butchers calmly carve flesh beside gutters filled with black sewage? Do you have the courage to look at what the AI is about to reconstruct the details history books deliberately left out? The descent into York's darkness begins now. The Gateway of Terror. First look at these white limestone blocks. This is Micklegate Bar, the most important of York's 4 main city gates. By medieval tradition, it was the only entrance reserved for monarchs when they visited the city. Above the towering archway, the iron spikes were never left empty. They were the racks for the losers in the game of royal power, hacked and mutilated skulls left exposed to the wind, the rain, and the cold of northern England. By the year 1500, it was no longer merely a masterpiece of military architecture. It had become a horrifying notice board of crime and punishment. Now listen to the sounds of decay. Above, the black crows never left. The sound of their beaks tearing at the dried flesh formed a constant rasping rhythm, like the ticking clock of death. When the rain fell thick, dark brown fluids seeped from the iron spikes and ran down the magnesian limestone, leaving stains that could never be washed away. The stench here offered no mercy. It was a blend of long rotting flesh and thick coal smoke leaking from nearby forges. It clung to hair, to lungs, to the cloaks of anyone who passed through. The locals no longer looked up. They hurried through the shadow of the archway with their eyes fixed on the ground. Terror had become routine, a part of everyday life. Cross this threshold, and the meaning of life itself begins to change. The city gate was not built to protect people, but to protect power. At Micklegate, the law was enforced through brutal exposure. A single stroke from the maiden guillotine, or a public dismemberment in the square beyond, was not merely punishment, it was a performance. Each skull on a spike marked the end of a life, but the beginning of a fear that spread across all of York. These were not statues. They were the heads of political prisoners caught at different stages of decay. Dark fluids seeped downward, clinging to the cracks of the ancient stone. Black crows gathered in flocks atop the gate, picking clean whatever flesh still clung to the skulls. As you step out from the shadow of Micklegate and move toward the Shambles, you begin to realize one thing. This city was not built with mortar and stone. It was held together by the silence of those who watched death from above. But the brutality above was only the prologue. For as the shadow of Micklegate falls behind you, you step straight into the suffocating trap of the Shambles, where blood no longer rests on iron spikes, but flows beneath your feet. Where the sky is suffocated. Look up. If you can still see the sky, then you haven't truly entered the Shambles yet. As you move deeper into the street, the space begins to contract. This is where jettying, the architectural practice of upper floors, projecting beyond the lower ones, reaches its most extreme form. The black oak timber frames and red brick houses did not stand upright. They leaned over the narrow alley like 2 colossal rows, collapsing inward toward each other. At its narrowest points, the distance between the rooftops shrank to less than an arm's length. Sunlight was completely cut off above, turning the street below into an artificial tunnel, a place where even midday felt like dusk. In the year 1500, this design was never meant to be poetic. It was a cold, practical calculation. The overhanging upper floors were not built merely to expand living space above, they served as a vast canopy for the meat stalls below. By ensuring that sunlight never reached the street, they kept the hanging slabs of flesh locked in damp shadow, slowing the inevitable rot. Inside this tunnel, the air thickened. Coal smoke from hearth fires could not rise and escape. It became trapped beneath rotting wooden eaves, blending with the damp rising from the street to form a greasy, clinging fog. When you breathed it in, it was no longer just air. It was a mixture of soot coating your lungs and acidic moisture slowly eating away at the lime mortar of the walls. That dampness clung to the skin, carrying with it the smell of decaying oak and centuries-old mold. Look at the walls. They never dry. The red brick and oak timber frames here are permanently saturated with moisture. Water dripping from the rooftops often carries waste from the upper floor drainage, where people lived before seeping back into the cracks of the decaying wood below. In the Shambles, a house was not an inert object, it was an entity saturated with animal fluids. The boundary between dwelling and slaughterhouse was completely erased, as blood from the cutting tables seeped deep into the foundations, turning the entire street into a vast biological tunnel, where disease hid within every fiber of timber, hundreds of years old. There was no escape for the light, and no escape for the stench. Here, the sky was no longer a symbol of freedom. It was reduced to a distant gray slit of light, a reminder that you were imprisoned inside one of the filthiest survival machines of the Tudor age. Now look down at your shoes. Can you feel the ground beneath you starting to turn slick? Because next, we descend to where light has never reached the Red River, flowing through the heart of the street. The arteries of filth. Pause for a moment. Don't rush to look at the meat stalls ahead. Right now, the only thing separating you from a death sentence is the steadiness of your feet on these slick cobblestones. Running down the very center of the Shambles was not a flat walkway, but a deliberately carved deep channel known as the Slops. This was the spinal column of York's open waste disposal system in the year 1500. The entire cobblestone surface of the street was engineered to slope inward toward this gutter. The AI will reconstruct a stone surface that never dries, perpetually slick and unnerving, polished by centuries of accumulated animal fat, forming a greasy film that clings to every grain of stone. The flow within the slops was not water. It was a complex and dangerous chemical entity. A thick mixture of freshly spilled livestock blood, animal waste from nearby pens, and household sewage dumped directly from the overhanging upper floors above. Trapped beneath the heat sealed inside the Shambles biological tunnel, this mixture began to undergo natural fermentation. The AI must render methane bubbles rising from the black sludge below, swelling, bursting, and releasing the sickly sweet stench of decomposing protein. The gutter churns with drifting fish scales, glinting grotesquely amid shredded offal, and clumps of animal hair fused together in floating mats. Look toward the corner of the street ahead. A porter struggles beneath the weight on his shoulders. His feet are bare, cracked, and split by the weather. One step slips, and his foot sinks deep into a pool of black liquid. In York, in the year 1500, this was no ordinary filthy mishap. It was a lethal exposure. Beneath that black flow lay a breeding ground for tetanus and blood infection. In an age without antibiotics, even a minor scratch exposed to this bloodstream of decay meant a countdown to death. The ground beneath your feet was not merely dirty, it was actively seeking a way into your body through any break in the skin it could find.
Are you certain you can keep your balance all the way to the end of this street?
This river flowed straight into the River Ouse, but long before it ever left the city, it had already seeped into the breath and the lives of everyone who lived here. And now, having tasted the horror beneath your feet, look up. Those who command this river of blood are waiting for you. Because just behind those dangling slabs of meat butchers with blood-soaked hands are watching your every step, and now we are about to enter the world of those who make their living from death. The demon-faced butchers. Look away from the pitch-black sewage flowing at your feet. Ahead of you are no longer rotting wooden walls, but stiff leather aprons hardened by dried blood. Look straight at them, the Shambles butchers, those who rule survival, at the very heart of this slaughterhouse. At the very crossroads where Shambles Street meets Little Shambles, the space opens up slightly, yet death grows thicker in the air. The Shambles butchers are unmistakable in appearance. They wear rough cowhide aprons stiffened by layers upon layers of dried blood accumulated over years, forming a rough black and crimson scale across the leather. Beneath the shadow of houses like number 15 or number 31, Shambles, their faces are stained with coal soot and animal grease, turning them into true demon faces, their fierce eyes ever watchful for any outsider who dares trespass into their domain. Look at the deep-cut grooves in the stone block at number 31. They are not scars left by time, but the imprint of millions of knife strikes blades driven through flesh and bone over 500 years. Echoing from King's Court, the small square at the end of the street, comes the unmistakable sound of a killing workshop. Heavy cleavers with worn wooden handles and rusted steel blades are swung without pause. The heavy pounding thump of wooden mallets hammering down onto cleavers, forcing their way through bone joints with a dry, brittle crack. Crack. The harsh haggling in thick Yorkshire dialects blends with the dense black swarms of flies, creating a chaotic wall of noise. This is the place where livestock just driven through the Micklegate Gate will meet the end of their lives, only to become slabs of raw red meat laid out on the stalls. Look closely, right in front of the gate of Holy Trinity Church. A customer steps a little too close to a butcher's stall. A hammer comes crashing down. Fresh blood bursts from the marrow, splattering into dark crimson streaks across the passerby's expensive silk sash. Beside the sanctity of the church stands the raw, exposed brutality of the slaughterhouse. The butcher merely glares his hand, never pausing, as it keeps swinging the knife, while mangy stray dogs lurk nearby, ready to snap up any scraps that fall at your feet. Here in the Shambles, morality stops at the church door, yielding to the raw instinct for survival that rules the busiest meat market in northern England. An ecosystem of parasites. You have faced the butchers. You have crossed a river of blood. But as the fading evening light begins to slip between the crooked rooftops of the Shambles, another world reveals itself, the world of those who survive last, lurking in the shadows. Turn into one of the narrow, twisting alleyways, known as the Snickelways, dark, muddy shortcuts, like Whip-ma-Wop-ma Gate or Lady Row. These are the black arteries of York places, where sunlight never reaches, and the stench of decay grows even more oppressive. A cramped space where inky pools of stagnant water reflect the faint glow spilling from nearby windows, and there, on forgotten slabs of meat, hanging limply in the shadows, thousands of sleek black rats begin their feast. They swarm and crawl over one another, sharp teeth gnawing into every strand of dark red flesh, leaving behind jagged, mangled bite marks. Right beneath the street, at the dark entrance to King's Square, emaciated stray dogs, ribs jutting out patches of fur, missing fight viciously over a discarded rotting ox head. An unrelenting struggle for survival, where the weak are crushed without hesitation. A rat leaps from a slab of meat into the gutter, known as the slops, then scrambles back up onto a piece of cloth a merchant has carelessly left behind. This symbiosis is not merely grotesque, it is a relentless machine for spreading disease. Every rat, every stray dog is a potential host, carrying fleas and pathogens from the black rat, the very agents that unleash the Black Death.
In this vicious cycle of rotting meat, blood, and waste, who do you think truly controls this street?
Humans, or the disease-bearing rodents. The Shambles is not merely a market or a street. It is a complete ecosystem of decay, where the boundaries between humans and animals, between life and death, are utterly erased. Everything is recycled, everything is eroded, and everything is a potential seed for the next epidemic. As you leave this dark labyrinth carrying the stench of the Shambles, clinging to your clothes and your breath, you begin to understand one thing.
These streets do not belong to the living.
They belong to the ghosts of disease and decay, waiting patiently for the right moment to swallow the entire city. The glow of tallow lamps and the encroaching darkness do not be mistaken into thinking that horror sleeps when the sun goes down. In York, in the year 1500, dusk brings no peace. It delivers only a darker, more dangerous kind of night. In the distance, the sun sinks behind the towers of York Minster, staining the sky a vivid hue like diluted blood. But deep within the shambles, that light cannot penetrate the overhanging roofs. A sickly yellow light begins to seep from the rusted window frames of the attic rooms. This is not the gaslight of a later century. It is the dim glow of candles made from discarded tallow, rendered from the very slaughter tables below. They burn slowly, exhaling acrid black smoke and casting a trembling light forever on the verge of being snuffed out by every cold gust drifting in from the river Ouse. In this wavering half-light, your eyes begin to betray you. Is that a butcher's apron swaying in the gloom, or a ghost lying in wait? As you move toward the end of the street, where it meets the pavement, the shadows begin their dance. The jettying architecture becomes an instrument of grotesque illusion. Under the flicker of candlelight, the timber-framed houses resemble enormous desiccated skeletons collapsing inward toward the street. The shadows of the remaining slabs of meat hanging from wooden racks stretch across the slick cobblestones, twisted and exaggerated, resembling human corpses suspended in mid-air. Take note of the rotting wooden posts at the corner of St. Crux Street. This is the domain of pickpockets and anonymous killers. A gaunt, filthy hand reaches out from the darkness of a narrow Snickelway, a rusted dagger catching the faint glimmer of light from a distant oil lamp. In the Shambles tonight, the bells from All Saints' Church are no longer a call to prayer, but a death knell for those who stray unknowingly. Here, silence does not mean safety. It is the prelude to a sudden violent attack. When a dark shape slips past behind the oak pillars, you realize this. The darkness of York does not merely conceal filth, it hides crimes that will never be brought into the light. Do not turn around too quickly. Do you dare to flee into the ruins of the darkness, or will you stand still and hope that you are not the next target? A prison in the heart of the street. But the darkness of murderers is not the only thing lurking behind the rotting wooden pillars, for in the very heart of the Shambles, there is another kind of darkness bound in chains, where the breath of life itself is imprisoned within damp, weeping stone walls. Behind the meat stalls near the area of St. Crux Parish Hall, there once stood temporary holding cells known as toll booths. These were not small formal prisons, but foul-smelling cages of stone and wood, where debtors' pickpockets caught in the act, or those unable to pay the market toll, were thrown without delay. The AI will reconstruct a dark, damp cell, where wastewater from the gutter known as the slops seeps through the gaps between the stones, rotting even the floor itself. The only light comes from a narrow rusted iron slit in the door, falling across nameless faces stripped of their dignity. In this darkness, a debt of only a few silver coins can turn you into a wandering shadow behind iron bars. Look at the hands reaching out through the narrow gaps between the bars. They are no longer the hands of human beings, gaunt, ashen, and covered in sores from lice and the acidic damp. These prisoners are not fed by the authorities. Their survival depends entirely on the rare mercy of passers-by. An empty, cracked wooden bowl lies amid the refuse, and animal fat scattered before the prison door. Those inside can only watch as fresh food passes by each day, while their insides wither away from hunger and thirst. A man who only yesterday was a butcher in the little Shambles now clings to the iron bars with hollow eyes. One misstep in business, one knife stroke that violated the guild's rules, and he was thrown in here. The line between a free man and a corpse in the dungeons of the Shambles is as thin as their breath in a York winter. When tuberculosis or the plague visits these cramped cells, there are no physicians and no salvation. All that remains is a name erased from memory and a body thrown into the river Ouse under cover of night. In the Shambles, justice does not reside in fairness. It resides in the cruelty of those who stand outside the bars looking in. But chains and iron bars are still a form of mercy, for when the bells of the minster toll the rhythm of death, a nameless force will sweep through every alley, turning the entire Shambles from a bustling market into a vast open grave from which no one can escape. An open grave. Look back at the street one last time. The sound of cleavers striking wooden blocks, the harsh cries of bargaining, the bellowing of livestock, all have vanished. In their place lies a suffocating silence, broken only by the wind screaming through window slits, nailed shut from the outside. The oak doors along Lady Row are marked with a dark crimson cross, the symbol of quarantine, where families wait to die inside their own homes. In the Shambles at this moment, the sound of life has become a rare luxury. The gutter known as the slops no longer runs with fresh blood. It is filled instead with hastily scattered layers of white lime thrown down to smother the stench of death. A horrific contrast, the stark whiteness of the lime-coating black rat carcasses and shriveled scraps of dried entrails. In King Square, the carts no longer carry meat. They carry human forms crudely wrapped in tattered burial shrouds. With churchyards like that of Holy Trinity, overwhelmed bodies are stacked atop one another like sides of pork only yesterday laid out at dawn. The distinction between butcher and prey, between rich and poor, has been utterly erased by the hand of disease. Look down at the cobblestones directly in front of number 31, the Shambles. A cart with a broken wheel lies overturned. From beneath a burial shroud, the pale hand of a child protrudes, touching the frozen wastewater below. The Shambles is no longer a market. It is a brutal lesson in prosperity built upon filth. When humans disregard the sanctity of life and choose to coexist with decay, the only possible end is nature's reckoning. The journey through York in the year 1500 ends here. The Shambles still stands a witness of stone and timber to a brutal age. The blood-soaked butcher stalls of the past are now gleaming shops, but beneath the polished stone, the Red River still flows silently through the city's memory. What do you find most haunting? The stench of blood, the clatter of iron chains, or the suffocating darkness? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
If you want to continue exploring the brutal, hidden corners of history through the eyes of AI, this is where to find them.
And don't forget to subscribe and like this video.
Thank you for having the courage to walk with me to the very end of this journey. I'll see you again in the next shadows.